Hello, everybody. Today is Tuesday, January 16th, and today, episode 72 of Block Digest is coming at you at block height 504,522. And today, I, Shinobi Monkey, would like to introduce Mr. Rick, our resident meme master.
Hey, everyone. How are y'all doing?
JW, the stormtrooper who is not a mindless clone.
Hey, guys. Enjoying the dip.
Janine, our resident researcher and actual reporter.
Hashtag straw woman.
And Acnix, some guy in a bus.
Hey, guys.
What's going on, man? It's good to fucking see you on camera again, dude. You getting your fucking shit sorted?
Oh, yeah. I still can't promise that this will be a regular thing yet. Not quite yet. Sooner or later.
It's still nice to have more people. You know, you get more people, more commentary, more stuff for everyone else to think about. All right, so let's dive in, I guess. Who would have thought that the somebody from PayPal actually has a brain and half an idea of what's going on? So this was a pretty interesting article. It's pretty much being asked here, Wences Cesares, I probably just butchered that pronunciation, about kind of the long-term potential for what Bitcoin could be. And he kind of broke things down into, I don't know, kind of a dichotomy between like a more centralized, like just database managing throughput and more of a protocol stack. And whether you're going to see Bitcoin used for payments, which way or the other. And he kind of broke down at the end that he can also see a scenario where neither of those happens, where we don't really see like the Silicon Valley or Wall Street kind of come out ahead in dominating the direction Bitcoin goes in. And it more just becomes kind of a global standard of value. So instead of just like that thing being used in any specific way, technologically speaking, as people are arguing nowadays, it's mostly what it's going to do is just give us the actual value of something. It's going to just be kind of the economic measuring stick that can't be distorted or cheated. And I mean, I'm sure anybody who's watching, who's been in the mumble a lot recently, everybody on the panel here knows Mr. Jal and his musings with John Nash, but Nash's role or relative importance in things aside, I think we can all agree that this is pretty much the argument that we've been discussing internally, at least abstractly, for a while. I'm sure JW wants to add some commentary to
that. No, my only comment is that John Nash made no significant contributions to economic thought.
Oh man, I was gonna say, like, it's surprising to see this guy talk about Bitcoin like sound money, like we hear Jal talk about, because that's what it sounded like coming through from this article, talking about Bitcoin as apolitical and just like you're saying, and I don't know, I thought it was funny to say, like, he talks about how the main thing about Bitcoin being like this trusted third party. And he's saying, like, Silicon Valley not catching that as the killer app. And I thought that's like, I guess, he's right about that. We're seeing a lot of this Silicon Valley jumping around with all these different ideas about what this thing is. But if they're just missing that, then, yeah, I mean, it could be a slow road to where they realize like that they missed the boat. But
let's kind of separate real quick, Jada. Let's separate Nash from like the underlying abstract.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to do. So, no, I mean, the concept of sound money or secure money, as I like to call it, is definitely an important concept, right? And it's just a matter of who you'd give credit for the work and in economics. And I think it's definitely guys like Mises and Rothbard, if anybody wants to pick up a book and dig into it a little bit. But yeah, no, it is really encouraging that guys like the Xapo CEO are starting to go, oh, wait a minute, there's actually something here with Bitcoin. And really, he probably doesn't understand what he's saying, but when he says that it could be sort of the global standard of value, what he's saying is that we would use it for a unit of account, right? Like everything would be priced in that. And that's the pinnacle of what it means to be money, right? There's like the medium of exchange, store of value, and you have to be both of those before you can be a unit of account. And so if he's right, then he's sort of reached the right conclusion, but in sort of a weird, sort of semi-optional, circuitous way. So what's interesting to me about this is that when you see guys that are increasingly stupider getting what's about to happen, that we're making progress, right? Like when we've got some other stories, but when you've got guys that are basically just political tools, right? Like a CEO of a company, these guys aren't usually very brilliant. When they start being able to say, oh yeah, Bitcoin is actually more important than the blockchain, right? They're not just like repeating these inane memes, and they're starting to understand that Bitcoin really is a thing that's about to eat the world's money. That's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm trying to catch up on Mises and Rothbard. Like I've been searching. Okay, I've been searching the library for those books. It's really like it's kind of crazy. I didn't see it in any library. I'm gonna have to go to a used bookstore or something and see if I can't pick up a copy.
All that stuff is free online. There's PDFs, and you can also get it on Kindle for like $1 a piece. The Mises Institute, MISES.
Boo, Kindle. Boo.
What?
Boo, Kindle. Boo, walled gardens. Boo.
They also track your reading habits.
As long as you read it, it'll make you richer.
You got to pick that sovereign individual up as well, right?
Yes, that is a book, I think. Yeah, JW, if you think Mises and Rothbard are required reading for the Bitcoin space, then so is The Sovereign Individual by James Davidson and Lord William Rees-Mogg. But yeah,
I haven't read it. It's not super easy to get a hold of. But here's the thing: like there's a long history of economics science that goes back to guys like Bastiat and further back, and you want to go ahead and grab those guys that are like the pillars, right? Start with the guys that are the most central. I'm sure that there's some interesting insights and some of that other stuff, but yeah, I mean, somebody like Rothbard is unquestionably responsible for the cypherpunk movement. He's been referenced. He's a brilliant, super clear, clean writer, and he's responsible for like the libertarian movement and all kinds of other stuff. So you can't go wrong with picking up something like the Anatomy of the State. It's just, a 15 or 20 page PDF, and it'll give you a good overview.
Yeah, you had something you wanted to say?
I lost my train of thought there.
All right, well, I'll hijack it then. Wences like talking like this, I think is just amazing, because it really shows grasping the underlying economic value and just not the technology and how you can play with that. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, what is the most important thing we're after? What it's control over your money and actual accurate price signals free of distortion. And when it really comes down to it at the end of the day, personally, I think that accurate price signal without distortion aspect is undeniably the more important aspect of something like sound money, because that is what allows the economy on a global scale to actually function free of political manipulation and distortion. And for people sorry, go ahead.
I recall what it was. I was just going to say, if you can catch the cliff notes or just even a summary of Mises, Rothbard, or Sovereign Individual, highly recommended. Can be hard to find, so yeah, take what you can get.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's like, yeah, like these guys have been kind of screaming at mainstream like economists from the grave for however long they've been dead. And I mean, it's like, that's the goal here is unfuck the global economy. And that's going to involve trade-offs. And I just think it's really fucking encouraging to start seeing people who manage companies in the space realize what is the most important trade-off. Freeing the economy from distortions, because that is what's actually going to improve people's lives.
Yeah, I do want to point out that I think it's how did you pronounce it, Shinomi Kisaris? That his last name?
I think so. I'm just going with it.
Yeah. Anyway, so Kisaris, if anyone doesn't recognize his name, he was one of the 6 men who signed the SegWit2x suspension email. So he was clearly, I mean, at least to me, that communicates that he was an influential person. If you're one of 6 people to cancel an entire Bitcoin fork, that seems like a big deal. And one of the things he tweeted on November 12th, which I can't remember the dates exactly. I think that was like 3 or 4 days after it was canceled. He tweeted that Bitcoin's most important quality is its censorship resistance. The rest will follow. I got too impatient with 2x. Pictures also took too long to download in the early internet. Bitcoin will eventually be able to process more payments. Yeah, hopefully he's going in the right direction with that.
Is that the first apology that we've heard from any of these jokers? Like that's
pretty much. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I got to give that guy credit for that. That totally changed my attitude towards him, I'll admit.
Yeah, that's where it's like, I don't know. That's where it's like when I see these attacks from guys like years ago, where this like was all coming from the same, like everybody kind of felt like on the same team, where it's like, I don't know. You see these guys, this like he's the CEO of Xapo, and Xapo was signing the NYA, and then later these tweets, and then this. It just makes it all feel like, you know, like he's saying, it's a long, kind of drawn out process. Maybe you stir up the pot a little bit with some news like 2x, and like it's just like my you know, what is it? You know, my conspiracy theories like start flickering off, saying like, oh, you know, they really do understand it. They're just BSing us. But you know, I don't know. These companies, they're big, and they've got some different employees and different leadership, and I'm sure they also have like, you know, struggle within the companies as far in which direction to go. So it's good to see this guy, you know, come out and say this, like you're saying.
Although, does anyone know whether Xapo has added SegWit yet? Because I probably won't accept his apology fully until he actually has SegWit in his wallet. Because as far as I remember, I don't think Xapo has SegWit yet.
Yeah, I think that would have been kind of news breaking if we had seen that happen.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I've kind of been losing track with everybody who's just completely lagging on support, and my ADD just got the best of me. So, who wants to dive into the next surprising group of people understanding things that we think they wouldn't understand?
Ding, what group is that? Oh, holy the Fed.
Shit. What the Fed Reserve? Understanding Bitcoin, this doesn't make sense, does it? Does it? So I'm gonna skip past the article. Everybody can read that if they want. But this is a pleasant surprise in my mind. This really is. Like, they pretty much break down Bitcoin to each of its constituent pieces, go through the entire game theory. They actually compare and contrast physical cash, digital cash, and current electronic payment systems with a very accurate and no bullshit breakdown of the different trust models involved in that. And they even compare Bitcoin to the Yap system from the Yap Islands. I'm sure most people watching are aware of that, and kind of compare the different like ownership models and kind of ledger models applied in these different systems. And then actually go through a very in-depth technical explanation and game theoretical explanation of the entire Bitcoin system. Like, they even, where is it? They've even broken Bitcoin transactions down into like 3 different abstract layers to kind of explain it. Like right here, the transaction capability is the ability to actually broadcast that transaction. So like the robustness of the peer-to-peer network, the lack of central failure points, and this is kind of like the first layer they lay out. And then transaction legitimacy, the fact that, you know, you have the public key it's encumbered to, a private signature from the private key is required to spend that, and there's nothing you can do to alter data and still have a valid transaction. And so the second layer. And then they finally go in to break down the transaction consensus and go into the process by which miners select a transaction, and how a miner including conflicting transactions in a block would pretty much make their block candidate illegitimate. And like anybody out there, I seriously suggest you read through this. But like this is, I don't know whether to say it's good news or bad news, but they actually understand, at least at the St. Louis branch of the Fed, what Bitcoin is and how it works. And they're not sticking their head in the sand and kind of telling themselves fairy tales.
Or at least they were willing to fund two researchers who understand what's going on. I mean, that's a good start too.
Yeah, that may have been an accident, but no, I think it's a good sign. It's like I said before, you know, as kind of the dumber end of the spectrum starts getting this, that's what we need for adoption. So it's all good.
Yeah, right on. Saw that, like how in the article it mentioned that you know, that these guys, they were saying like how a big argument is Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, and they see the same thing in fiats around the world, comparing them to fiats. And you know, like they talk about how it can avoid inflation by, you know, the strong community backlash that would happen if they tried to increase the supply. So it is good to see, like you're saying, these researchers for the Fed, you know, at least reporting some good news.
Yeah, I don't mean to be flippant about that either. Like, I think there's a tendency that people have to think of people that are really political as being really intelligent just because they have power. But it's actually, I think Hayek. No, it wasn't Hayek. There's been some interesting kind of public choice theory sort of work on this, and basically, if you put all your time and energy and effort into becoming really good at politics, which you would have to do in order to be, you know, a major player inside the Fed or something like that, right? You're making deals, you're doing sort of, you know, wink, wink, nod, nod stuff all the time, right? You become really, really good at that. You can't help but have other things atrophy, right? And so that's why somebody that, you know, is like a mathematician or a programmer, they're not going to be the kind of person you want to send in to broker a deal with Cuba, right? It's a different skill set. So when I say dumb, I actually really mean dumb. Like they're just not very intelligent because they've practiced being crooked, right? They've developed the skill sets of a mobster and a criminal instead of the skill sets of somebody that's productive and trying to solve real problems. So no, I really do think it's a good sign that they're getting it, or at least that people in their space are getting it. And yeah, I think we're going to see more and more of it.
Well, I mean, I'm more interested in kind of how this legitimizes it. One of the sections in the paper actually explicitly states that there is effectively no difference between a state currency and Bitcoin in terms of both lack any kind of inherent value, like in and of itself. Like its value and use is solely as a money. And to just see them kind of intellectually, honestly attach their name as a branch of the Federal Reserve to that statement, like I think that really is going to add a lot of legitimacy and have a lot of people who've kind of been dismissing this, you know, in the recent past, really rethinking that assessment of it.
Well, I mean, this is just paving the way for the other Fed banks to start, you know, passing around this documentation. Like, hopefully this is the same social class that already intermingles, right? And we can get a lot of, you know, a lot of saturation of this type of work. You know, it's exposure, and it looks like they actually put the time and effort into this, and that's all that's needed. It's just people actually putting their focus onto it so that they can comprehend it. And I think that there's a huge lack of comprehension because the FOMO gets in at people. You know, it digs in at you.
And that kind of interesting little comparison. You have the central bank in Germany kind of taking the opposite tone of things. I mean, you've got a branch of the American Federal Reserve kind of looking into things very unbiasedly, like breaking down what it is, why it is, how it is. And at the flip side, we have the central bank in Germany pretty much saying if we try to do anything regulation wise to stop Bitcoin or kind of, you know, cool everybody's horses, we have to do it all at once. And he kind of breaks into looking at the big wave of Chinese crackdowns that we've seen over maybe the past year or so. and South Korea getting a little strict with how they're handling their exchanges and infrastructure. And it's kind of just looking at this isn't stopping anything. And so at the same time that you have, you know, the Fed in America looking at this objectively, like what is the net value here? We have bankers in Europe going, hey, everybody, we need to be on the same page if we're going to stop this.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think some of those stars are starting to line up. We'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, because my response to, what was it, the finance minister who said that? I didn't catch which part of government he was in.
I believe a board member of the Bundesbank.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So because he said something about how there should be global rules for Bitcoin. And my response to that would be, there are global rules. It's called consensus. That is the global rule.
True indeed. You speak the truth.
Yeah, I think it's really fortunate that Bitcoin came around at a time where we haven't had governments consolidate to the point where global rules are really practical. I mean, we don't even have global rules against crack cocaine anymore. That was globally enforced pretty well, even up until 10, 20 years ago when Spain started legalizing stuff. So, and it was completely ineffective anyway, right? So I think we're fortunate that we don't live at a time where governments were able to close down the whole globe and control chemical flow, or we might not be in a place where we could actually make this work right now.
And also, can you even imagine, I mean, there's I think I've made this point before, is that, you know, governments around the world can't even get together and come up with a, I don't know, unified action to, you know, go against global warming, which regardless of, you know, whether you believe in that or not, it's obvious that they're not very effective at even coming together to implement any kind of policy in that regard. So the idea that they're going to come together and try to regulate Bitcoin on a global scale is kind of ridiculous. Most of these countries, they don't cooperate very well at all, even on things that, you know, they keep reminding us are of global importance and could end up in a catastrophe. Even that is not enough to get them to work together. So if they do end up working together for this reason, it's going to take decades.
I'll go ahead and bring this up just because I was looking into where exactly was I talking about this, because this brings in the Asian market crackdown. And, you know, there was some news recently about how China's trying to block domestic internet access users from accessing Bitcoin exchanges. And we know we just had that net neutrality deal passed with the FCC here in the US, and it makes me worrisome about that sort of idea of maybe they are going to try and come together and push it to where if you go to a Bitcoin exchange site, that's illegal, or you can't even access it if you're on this ISP, to where, I don't know, it just makes me think we're going to have to create a mesh net of local internets and to actually get a free internet and a not free internet that. I just saw that news, and I know the net neutrality deal passed, and we're talking about, can they come together to attack Bitcoin? I see that as definitely a possible attack vector. What do you think, JW?
No, it's definitely a possibility. I think it's not likely to succeed, right? If you look in the Bitcoin threat model, I've just got a ton of terrible things that can happen. It's basically a catalog of all the ways that if I was an evil monster, I would try to, you know, keep the world enslaved, right? But there's good countermeasures for a lot of this stuff, and the satellite being up, I think, is really interesting. I think we don't really talk enough about the really freaking hard work that guys like Nick Xapo are doing and trying to get the radio transmission stuff working. But that's our fallback plan, right? And we've got a few of those, and hopefully we won't need them, but we pretty much have some pretty good ways to go if things get really absurd, right? We can't control the flow of chemicals across borders. Try controlling the flow of radio waves, right? It's not going to work. We'll bounce that shit off the ionosphere and we'll send it, you know, from one side of the globe to the other, and you're going to have to be running around trying to find every guy with a generator in the woods. It's just not, it's not likely to to be something that stops us. But you know, it doesn't mean that there isn't a concern with this stuff, and that, you know, depending on the actions of government, it could slow adoption.
Yeah, that's like where I think of like, could it stop it? No, but it could certainly slow it. And, you know, if anything, it would just hasten the separation as far as a free and a not free internet.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried about that myself too, just because, you know, even if you remove Bitcoin from the picture, I mean, the landscape over the past 10 or 20 years really has just been kind of slow inching attempts to just further lock the internet down more and more. I mean, if like, just look at the UK. I mean, like, for Christ's sake, you have the police running around arresting people for saying offensive things on Twitter. Like, like there are literally people in the UK going to jail and being fined because they complain about like grooming gangs that go around and rape young girls in their neighborhoods. And like, that's just twisted. And that was kind of a direction that we were going in before Bitcoin even popped up.
Right, but that's partly because there's identity tied to that. A counter argument for that would be like Cody and BitTorrent, right? Like there's a lot of money in Hollywood that like would like to see that stuff shut down, but it's just not practical, right? So I think we're still okay. I think it came along early enough, but you know, we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you had a major, like let's say one major ISP decided to go ahead and try and block Bitcoin traffic from going through any of its servers, there are ways to, like, if you're affected by that, or you're using that ISP, there are ways to get Bitcoin transactions out surreptitiously without making it obvious. Like you could take a picture of the Bitcoin transaction text and send that to someone. Now, obviously, they'll probably detect that. That would be easy, but you could hide the transaction in the photo file itself. Like there are a ton of ways that even without going into the complicated stuff with the satellites and everything, you could a lot of different ways.
Great to hear. I mean, like, you know, kind of put me at rest with that.
Yeah, but my big worry is like that's a real blow to adoption. I mean, if we see a world where that kind of stuff starts dominoing everywhere, you're talking like the black market only. Like the Bitcoin would be intricately tied into how well the black market is performing, and that would be the only place that it would be able to find utility or kind of find any price against other types of assets or currencies.
Yeah, I mean, but on the other hand, like I would prefer that 401ks adopt Bitcoin, but if Bitcoin needs to become the next like global cocaine, that might, I don't know if what's faster, right? Like if they make it illegal and all the kids want to own it, is that faster than all of the old men with 401ks putting 1% in? I don't know. It's not something I would feel great about trying to attack, right? Like there are things that can happen. There's things that I'm sure people have brainstormed and attempted. I mean, we've seen a lot of historical attacks on stuff, but man, trying to shut down the movement of bits, right? Like digital numbers, just that is by far the hardest thing that any government has ever faced, right? And it hasn't been successful at other stuff. It hasn't been successful at stuff like cocaine, where you can have dogs that can sniff that stuff out from like 100 yards, right? And they still can't pull that off. So I think it's going to be all right. It could slow adoption, but then again, it could accelerate it because it gets, you know, put into that cool category. And you look at what happened in South Korea when they just talked about banning it and people freaked out. Like, I think we might be past that point. Once Chase is out there saying Bitcoin is amazing, you can't take that stuff back and just say, oh, actually, we made a mistake. It's really terrible. You guys are not allowed to own it anymore. I know you guys had 1,000% gains that year, but now it's illegal and you should still vote for me, by the way. I don't know if that works anymore.
Yeah, I would like to see a South Korea moment happen in one of the European countries or the United States. That would be really fun, because I saw today that I think it was I can't remember his name. It was the journalist who reports out of Korea, and he was saying that he had overheard a conversation between these 4 middle-aged women who were talking about Bitcoin and what they should do about it. Yeah, Joseph Young. Yeah, Joseph. Yeah. So he overheard these middle-aged women talking about Bitcoin, how it works, and whether they should buy some. And they ended up having like a pooled fund of $4,000 worth of Bitcoin. And one of the things they discussed was, did they think it was likely that the government would ban cryptocurrencies? And their answer was that when you have 1/3, apparently, I mean, it seems kind of a high number, but they said that 1/3 of the population has Bitcoin or is trading cryptocurrency. I think it was trading cryptocurrencies in general, so not specifically Bitcoin. But when you have that many people in a country using something, that makes it really hard to come out and say, okay, we're going to take this away from you.
I think you're right. It's like starting to get to that point where the political blowback would be a little too hard to try. Like, yeah, and like you're saying, it's just nearly impossible to stop bits.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now I'm gonna count on you guys to keep me in check here for slide to the next story.
Oh,
keep digging in this for a minute. Like, see, that's where things get sticky, because that might be the case in some place like South Korea or Japan. But what about somewhere like the United States or England or France? You know, what are the population like penetration percentages there? Because, you know, that it might be the issue in South Korea that they couldn't pull that off, but you might be able to just do that like snap in some place like the US if you just attach the right narrative to it. And now that becomes an issue of, well, hey, when are we going to, I mean, like, look at the US, like the wars that we've started over the past 20 years over just the most outright bullshit lies. Like, when are we going to see a day where somebody starts a war over cryptocurrency because one jurisdiction is in that position where they just can't go, hey, this is banned, guys, but the one starting the war did and doesn't want like some other country allowing this thing that they see as a problem to keep festering? Like the bigger we scale up, like the incentives start impacting more and more like large scale social events. And I mean, like that spirals.
Well, I was just going to say, like,
I think that's how we got here, though. You know, I think that's how we arrived at this point. I think we're moving in that direction in 2007, 2008. Like, we were locking down the IP. That is what triggered so much of this financial hoopla in 2008, which unraveled into what Bitcoin is now, I think. Like, that whole financial downfall, I think, is very coupled to emotions rather than anything else. The proof in the pudding, I think, is things like the Labor issue, right? People felt emotional about that. They felt betrayed. And this was the unraveling of that betrayal, right? So now I don't think you can do that, because I don't think people trust the system enough. Don't think you can have another like Iraq war and a Gulf war and right after the other. I don't think we're there anymore.
Well, I mean, I was just about to
go ahead.
Sorry. Right. I was just about to say, like, whenever we're talking about the percent of the population that owns cryptocurrencies over there and whether or not they're going to push back on regulation, I think the percent drops drastically when we're talking about going fight for a war. Like maybe 5% of the population is enough to stir up people, because you're talking about people's sons and daughters going die, and not just, somebody shutting down your ability to gain Bitcoin. I think that percent drops drastically.
Yeah, but I mean, is it really that simple though? I mean, if you attach the right narrative to things, like ISIS pulled off this attack because Bitcoin. I mean, how drastically will that change public opinion of things? I mean, like, it really
is I would blame, and other people have talked about this, but I would try to make the next global financial crisis be blamed on Bitcoin, right? Like, oh yeah, sorry, 40% of your wealth, that was 2008, maybe 70% of the nation's wealth vaporizes over 2 weeks, and then just get everybody really pissed off and focused on Bitcoin. I think that it's still possible. I think that they're really good at that sort of stuff, right? And
they could pull the whole this is QE 4.0 and you know we're trying this and it was a terrible failure and we've made things so much worse, and all they have to do is say that, right?
Yeah, so I mean that would still be a temporary setback, right? Like from the moment that encryption was invented, this was inevitable, right? And it's inevitable that it's going to succeed because the again, you just can't stop bits from going around, right? We saw the crypto wars, the original crypto wars, right, where cryptography was classified as a munition, because those guys knew back in the 90s, like the CIA, the NSA, everybody knew that if they allow citizens to have access to cryptography, the game is over, right? So the game has been over for 30 years. We're just you know, they have slowed adoption, right? Because we would have been there a long time ago, possibly. But it's a matter of like, do we get there in 50 years or do we get there in 15 years, right? It's not going to be the difference between not getting there or, you know, just completely failing. So, you know, a global financial crisis, maybe a couple big wars, maybe, you know, a real big war, which we haven't had since maybe Vietnam, could slow things down. You know, we get everybody really in a patriotic fervor over Russia, maybe a nuclear, you know, accident, you know, stuff like that could happen. My comfort in all of that is that even though that would be effective, I think the people that have access to the buttons, they know that it's not in their own personal best interest, right? We can count on those bastards, even though they're bastards, right? I'm not afraid of Kim Jong-un, even though he's a complete psychopath, because it doesn't put any money in his pocket to kill me. If it did, if it put 75 cents in his pocket to kill me, I'd be terrified, right? But it gives him no benefit. And Trump is in the same position, or all of these guys are in the same position. There's a moment in time that comes by, maybe a millennium, right, where these guys can like powerfully benefit by investing in this technology. And then letting it happen. And those are the same guys that are in a position to prevent it from happening. So I think that's our best safeguard, is that they will just be richer and better off for participating. And that's the security model of Bitcoin.
And if the government were to go like and try and convince people that Bitcoin was the cause of the financial crisis, I don't think they would go with you know, the reason is because it was funding ISIS or any other or alt-right or whatever. I think they would go for it helped with tax avoidance or tax evasion, because I saw a tweet from Quinn Norton a few days. I don't know if you guys know who Quinn Norton is. She was the partner of Aaron Schwartz, and she tweeted, I think a few days ago, that it was like, it made me really angry. She tweeted something about how, like, I know that it makes you upset and your stomach hurts when you think about the fact that your taxes are being used to kill brown children with sky robots in other countries. But paying taxes is just part of being, it's what you have to do to be part of a civilized society. And my response to that was, first of all, saying that, like, why is it's not brown children, it's children. Like, can we stop focusing on what the color of their skin is and just call them children? You're killing children. I don't care what color they are. You're killing children. And at what point did being part of a civilized society, when did that become inextricably linked to murdering children? That's what I would like to know. And if I have to participate in starving the state, which is like part of what counter economics is, basically any economic action that is nonviolent but may in fact be in opposition to the state's plans. If I have to participate in starving the state in order to stop killing children, I will do that before I participate in this so-called civilized society that, in order to be civilized, somehow has to kill children in other countries.
Well, I mean, yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think this is what's great about Bitcoin is the incentives just all line up, because, I mean, like we're saying, I mean, if you try and like send people to war over it, then it's like, you know, you're asking people to send people to die over this thing where the information is like impossible to control at this point. And, you know, it's just, it's something where, I don't know, it's I think the incentives for them to shut it down could create that power vacuum as well, where some criminal could rise from the ranks out of nowhere. And, you know, like it does that incentive is there for them to slowly change over these hands, the same hands that are kind of controlling the system now. And I don't know. And like, you know, and as far as the taxes go, and just like us, the people that use Bitcoin, and we see where it goes and what it's being used for, are kind of, and, you know, this, I don't know, it's all sort of lines up to where if we could just start using it, maybe we can create this, you know, like, you know, a free internet and a not free internet, just like a societal way to run things where you can actually make sure that your money spent is being used for something that you'd like. Hopefully, I don't know, that's just rose-colored glasses I put on every now and again where we all go sing Kumbaya in the sunset.
No, I mean, what's great is that all this stuff, all of these concerns are totally really good and legitimate. And this is the stuff that Mises and Rothbard have been writing about for 100 years, right? Like we're not the first guys to ask these questions. And the reason that Bitcoin exists is because a lot of really smart guys in San Francisco read Rothbard and said, you know, we actually don't have to kill babies in order to have a functioning society. It's really not a requirement. In fact, it's a hindrance. And so how do we go about, you know, effectively unwinding this Leviathan that's turned us all into slaves? And then they came up with Bitcoin, and I think it's working. I mean, I think we're on track. You know, Bitcoin is set up so that it buys us our freedom, right? We're going to pay off the slave owners. We're not going to try to go blow them up because they have way more guns and bombs than we do. We're just going to write them really big checks and incentivize them to participate and let us go in peace. And you know, if they do that, they'll be richer. You know, they won't be able to hand off a bunch of slaves to future generations, but they'll be able to pass down more cash. And if they don't waste it, which they probably will, because they're stupid or they wouldn't have chosen that line of work. But, you know, they don't know that. So they're going to buy in, they're going to have a big pile of cash, and then it's going to get redistributed, and it'll be like those guys never happened.
Yeah, and hopefully help educate them and improve their moral compass as well along the way, right?
Right, got those smart researchers spreading those thoughts from the Fed.
Mm-hmm. All right, and let's flip-flop tones to governments thinking about not being stupid. Woo! Norm Kelly, yes, like Norm MacDonald, from Toronto, is going to try and convince the city to look into accepting Bitcoin for things like parking tickets, taxes, you know, all the bureaucratic overhead whenever you got to go deal with the city for something. And I think one of the funniest parts to me personally was whatchamacallit, this quote from him: "From my perspective, I'm an arts man. So what I'd like to do is have more professional eyes on this." But he said, "I'd rather be ahead of the wave than behind it." And so I think it's kind of, I don't know, like this guy is self-admittedly pretty much technically clueless. And you can tell like he's not the youngest guy, but he's still looking at this thing just explode into the public discourse. And he's receptive to it. He's like, wait a minute, like how can we like keep being the cutting edge city? How can we do something useful with this? Let's actually find out, instead of just be a bunch of out of touch people in a room arguing like we know what we're talking about. And I like, it's a lot of polar different tones with different governments in today's news desk.
Yeah, but like I really agree with this sentiment. It's like just like let's go ahead and build the infrastructure, you know, because it looks like this thing is going in a direction where, you know, it's going to be necessary at some point. So better to go ahead and be first than be last, and you're not necessarily even first anymore because, you know, there are other countries where they are allowing their citizens to pay their taxes with crypto, and so I mean, like at this point, I think that yeah, it's great to see because like I think 2018 might be the year where we start to see like real infrastructure within the government set up for crypto. And hopefully, you know, that's something where once those models get built, it'll kind of like just sort of, you know, exacerbate where it'll just sort of spread outward and these models will start being replicated and people will start to see how Bitcoin works with them. And that's something where I think a lot of people know that user interface right now is kind of some trouble. So like actually just getting that infrastructure built to where people are working with it. I think that's important. It's good to see, and hopefully we'll see more of it.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet this is par for the course, though, in terms of the, kind of feelings of different governments and their kind of actions, right? I think that this is kind of the way it's going to work into the distant future. We're going to see companies, countries go into it and go out of it. And there's going to be ongoing disputes. Yes, we accept it for taxes and everything and trade, and then, some stuff doesn't go their way and they decide to pull out for a little bit. They're going to come back to the table, but maybe their fiat's been stabilized to the point where they actually don't have a high demand for it. It's actually helped fix them. So they're just kind of backing out a little bit. And having those opposing views at the table and that involvement is great. That's culture. That is vibrant, right? Like that's good to me to see the constant shifting opinions and such. It means that people are considering things.
So I think we're going to talk about the price later, but
no price talk. No price talk for you.
All I was going to say is that, the price doesn't really reflect right now what we want it to reflect. What we want it to reflect is sort of awareness and interest in how much people want to get their hands on it. But when governments get involved, you can't really see that, right? Because it's manipulated, right, through various ways, and we'll talk about how governments do that later. But the reality is that regardless of what the price is doing, we can just tell from stories like this that the interest is going up, the desire to own it is going up, even among random little government entities, right? Like they want to accept it. I think that's what's important, right? When we're talking about something becoming money, we just want it to become globally adopted, and all of these things are good signs.
Well, I would disagree with the statement that the current price doesn't reflect interest, because as everyone knows, the price of Bitcoin was at this level at the beginning of December. I mean, we haven't gone down that far, guys. Like all the people that are posting charts that it basically looks like a complete collapse, like it's all going down. It's like, no, what you should actually do is zoom out and see where we were at the beginning of 2017, which was, I think, $700 or something like that. Like,
right. Like, what I'm saying is, like, the in dollars and cents, we may have dropped 30%, and normally that would tell us that there's 30% less sort of desire to own this asset and interest in it. But I don't think I don't think anybody could possibly think that that's an accurate reflection right now, right? With stories like this coming out, do we really think fewer people are interested in it today than they were 30 or 60 or 90 days ago? I guess I can't say 90 to your point, but 60 days ago.
Do you know the way to the moon? Show me the way to the moon.
It depends on whether you count all of the random noobs that just bought in and then sold immediately after realizing how crazy everything was going.
Yeah, but those guys will be back, right? Like they've had their first experience. They know about it. They've gone through all of the hassle of like buying it, getting Coinbase to work, all that sort of stuff. Like that's all forward progress that's not lost.
Yeah, I mean, like this thing, like you're saying, I don't know, we're talking about this like drop, and I'm just like thinking like, yeah, I went back and looked, it's like I zoom out and I look, and these it's like, yeah, we spent a little over a month here at this price range between 12 and 18, just sort of gaining our support. And I don't know, you look back and that was like around 1.8 to 2.9 or between 4 and 5 the last time that these sort of like a little bit over a month period of gaining some support, and then we jumped up. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, for me, I was definitely one of those buy the dip opportunities.
So who want? Okay, let's get the price talk out of the way. Who wants to take the price talk? I don't do price talk.
But, like we're saying, I mean, like I'll go ahead and talk about it. And I wrote down some notes here on it. Because it's saying that this is mostly coming out of news from Asia. Like like we're saying, most of us, like, we understand these dips and everything, and like think we're not you know, we're familiar with it being like an Asian market story, kind of shutting things down. That's kind of slowing this down. But I think we also know that this is really kind of technical moves in the market, really finding an explanation. And it's just like, hey, this is happening. The market needs a news story to figure out why it's happening. And so they put the news out. And yeah, like a lot bigger price drop in the alts.
Tether, Tether screen, buy Tether, all in Tether.
Yeah, no, they dropped hard. I was actually thinking about picking up some alts. I'm glad I didn't, man. Like, you know, this is just like, you know, this is a price fluctuation that I think is technical. And like we're saying, you know, this is a buy the dip opportunity for us that sort of know what the bigger picture is here and what's going on. And yeah, they have like this crazy thought of, you know, crypto being crypto, that there was a video released last week that said Bitcoin was brought to you by aliens. So that's probably why the price is dropping, because people don't want to influence, you know, the state of a galactic war by, you know, contributing to the other side. But that's all based off just the notion that, you know, Bitcoin comes from an unknown source and it's all computer code, so therefore it must be aliens. And you know,
come on. Okay,
it's just a comical little video, but yeah.
Yeah, but if any of you out there sold Bitcoin because someone told you that it was made by aliens, first of all, if it was me and I thought that, I would actually buy it, not sell it. But oh well.
No, yeah, that's
Wait,
that's what I think I'm doing. Announce some more alien takeover, and I'll see if my limits go up.
The GCHQ is coming for Janine. Shit.
No, that's an ambulance. That's an ambulance. Can you scroll up to the top of that article? I want to see who wrote it, because it's TechCrunch, and I don't trust them anymore.
Yeah, that's
who wrote it? Is it the dude? Is it him? Oh, okay. Okay, John Russell. Not bad. Okay. I still won't trust TechCrunch. But whatever.
Look, guys,
I don't trust any of them. I just grab like the first bullshit article that comes up on Google and use that, because it's not going to get any better than that. Use it as a springboard.
Yeah, that was a great article. You just reached up out the stars and grabbed the perfect one.
Dude, the guy on the roller coaster has it right. Just take the ride, motherfuckers.
Well, yeah, because like Tether, I don't know if we mentioned it in a show yet, but when the Tether hack was announced was that November? Yeah, I think it was really weird, because when the hack was announced, you'd think, okay, people would want to sell Tether, price would go down, but no, it went up. So Tether is really freaking weird, not for reasons that have been circulated a lot. It's just weird for that reason. The people using it are weird.
Well, I mean, it's like all you can really do to keep that price in line is that promise of redemption and the arbitrage. I mean, aside from that, it's just demand. And I mean, when it comes to running arbitrage, I mean, kind of need Tether unless you have pretty wide banking access.
Yeah, that's where I don't know. That's where I think the price doesn't really reflect demand, because like JW saying, the demand's really high up there. I think that whenever it does start reflecting it, you know, that's when we're going to start seeing everybody saying, I should have bought the dip. Yep.
You know who's buying the dip? Kind of, sort of. I just kind of said that, even though it's not really sensical. Russia. Yeah.
Governments.
So yeah. Some private investors, air quotes, KGB, is buying 2 power plants for about $3 million to use solely for crypto mining.
Wait, $3 million each or total?
It's not really clear, the language.
It's $3 million. If that was the price of both, that seems really cheap to me for a power plant.
Yeah, it's way too cheap for a nuclear power plant. Are they nuclear or no?
Come on, this is Russia. Like, I'm sure they're not selling to just like some stranger. It's probably just sort of like a turnover.
I don't know. Like, it's a pile of cement that you can burn coal in.
Yeah, Yeah, I was about to say it doesn't say in the article, but it sure as heck doesn't look nuclear. Although I was literally going to ask, when do we have a nuclear power plant built for crypto mining? Mr. Robot, anybody still trying to hope that makes sense in the end?
Where are nuclear powered flying cars? I mean, people are eating Tide Pods. Like we were promised flying cars. Might as well make them nuclear, right? I don't know.
The answer in crypto is 2 weeks.
That material is so strongly controlled, right? Like you could argue that is actually a pretty effective global control, unlike cocaine. And so if it wasn't for that, I think we'd have them, on some island somewhere, because it's pretty amazing. You don't have to transmit the power, right? So there's got to be places that are far away from populations that. But man, the capital expense to get up a nuclear power plant, those are like 25 or 30-year investments, and maybe without a bunch of government intervention, they can be 10-year investments. But crypto hasn't even been around that long, so anybody that is in a position to drop that kind of cash is still probably trying to figure things out. And like I said, even if they started 2 years ago, we'd still be 8 years out.
I think we're still waiting on the advent of the nuclear battery, right? Like that'd be a great thing. Should be a way to eventually be able to make that where it's like somewhat cost effective and pretty safe. There's plenty of different isotopes out there, and I don't know. I just think that imagine a battery that you don't need to charge in a car. Come on now.
I think we'll probably see satellites mining Bitcoin first. Get them out there on the other side of the atmosphere. Some big solar arrays. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up now, but I could see that happening faster because there wouldn't be as much of an investment involved.
Either which way, like it is definitely bullish to see governments buying up power plants for the purpose of mining. And I don't know. That's something where I think we will start to see more power plants donated to that sort of. I mean, we already sort of see a lot of hydroelectric plants sort of being taken over for their excess power for mining, and it just makes a lot of sense. So it'd be I could see that continuing on to where we start to see actual plants built strictly for the purpose of mining.
JW, we don't make stuff up around here. We prophesize. We are Bitcoin prophets, not some random jagaloons.
All right. Go read Rothbard then.
But another tone flip-flop. You got people in Russia preparing to gobble up all the exodusing miners, but China continuing to go further. Rick kind of just hinted at this earlier. You want to take it over?
Well, yeah, I think we pretty much covered it as far as just the People's Bank of China saying that they need to outlaw these currencies as much as possible and starting to break down onto domestic internet services that are, allowing these trading of cryptocurrencies and even breaking into, I guess these, I've honestly, I read a little bit of this article. I think they were saying that they weren't really cracking down too much on over-the-counter trades still, as far as just small local trades. It was mainly just a bigger crackdown on anything online. So, it's basically I guess we're trying to see the biggest attack on the idea of trying to stop Bitcoin trading, as much as possible over there in China. And I mean, it's, it's like we're saying, it's definitely hurting the idea of adoption, but, I don't think we're going to see it stop. So, but we're definitely seeing more companies go to these other Asian markets. And I mean, this is just, we're going to probably see this continue to clamp down until I don't know. I mean, because if it's going this direction and we're saying with net neutrality, I could see it playing into a bigger picture thing where it could last a lot longer than I'm even thinking. So, but I don't know. I kind of let my mind run away with that sort of thought. I think that we're right in saying this just can't really be stopped. I mean, they might try.
The one thing that it's hard to know what's going to happen in the short term with any of this stuff, right? In the long term, if you're a smart investor, you're saying, hey, this is undervalued because of what it will eventually be. and it's going to be that on a certain time frame, right? And if you're smart, then you figure out how much money you have that you could put in that investment and wait for that time horizon to eclipse, right? So if you're trying to invest in Bitcoin for like the next 2 years, I don't know if that's a great idea, because we don't really know what's going to happen in the next 2 years, right? Governments could clamp down and the price could go down. But if you're investing for the next 5, 10, or 15 years, then it's kind of a no-brainer. And if I knew nothing about Bitcoin other than the fact that it was hard to buy, that would be like, if it was just like some kind of random metal, right? And it was hard to buy, and I thought that it was going to eventually get easier to buy, or it was possible to buy it, right? There's like a stream of people. You see like a line of people out front of the restaurant, right? Like people are trying to get in. They want this thing. They're waiting for it, and they don't all have it yet, but eventually they're, given enough time, they'll be able to get more and more of it. Just knowing that means that it should be a pretty good investment, right? Because it means that the price doesn't really reflect the demand, because a lot of buyers are excluded from the marketplace and they're waiting to get in. And I think the more governments clamp down and the price pops down like that, if you're a long-term investor, you're like, great. I mean, that's a very logical reason to buy the dip, not even knowing anything about the technology, just knowing that people want this thing and they're being prevented to get it. And eventually they're not going to be prevented to get it as much. That's a great investment just in and of itself.
Yeah, though there would be exceptions to that. For example, I always see people standing outside to get the latest iPhone, and I've never owned any Apple devices.
No, but I mean, it doesn't mean that it's, like I said, even if you didn't understand the technology, it doesn't mean that it's good or that it's going to solve problems, which I think both of those things are true with Bitcoin. But it does mean that it's very reasonable to bet the price is going to go up, right?
Yeah. I mean, Janine just pulled up this tweet. I'm going to jam in here, though. This shit is hilarious. Two things are infinite: the universe and the number of times China can ban Bitcoin. And I'm not sure about the former.
Yeah, I think...
I can't actually, because that's based on an original quote which said that, I think Einstein, I don't know if I've never ever actually checked if Einstein actually said the quote, but it's attributed to Einstein, where he says that there are two things that are infinite, the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the former. So it's based on that.
Yeah, maybe the price is also infinite. I don't know. Like I'm just thinking about when what JW's saying about if they ban it, like what could it do to the price? Because or if they successfully restricted enough, like what would happen to the price? And I mean, like wasn't that in 33 when like the ban on gold happened and the price jumped up? Like I mean, like that's what I started thinking about. Like the minute they can't have it, they want it.
Totally. Yep.
And
yeah, eventually the value will be so high, people have trouble comprehending the numbers, and then we start going back the other direction.
Speaking of
the situation soon enough.
This is no good. It's no good at all. It's very, very bad.
Another group of smart people trying to stifle innovation.
Mm-hmm. And like this really like irritates me, having dealt with this kind of shit before. But like, Capital One is pretty much entirely like no crypto, no wires to any crypto business. Like any of our customers are completely cut off from any services for this. And they've actually go on to kind of say TD Bank is also experiencing similar complaints from customers. PNC Bank has kind of started locking down what their customers can do with their accounts. And this one, I'm kind of bothered by, because that's the guys who issue the Shift card. And right now it says all they're doing is kind of blocking international wires. So for now, like my card still worked yesterday, but that's like, I'm going to be in a tight spot if that gets cut off.
Well, see, I wonder if this isn't a lot of people at the price dip complaining completely irrationally, like they signed away their rights, they signed away their contracts, and they're trying to do chargebacks. They're complaining to their banks that, I got ripped off by Coinbase, like they're pissed, right? So Or, because I think that some of these banks have actually kind of, endeavored into this a little bit. They're playing games, maybe. I don't know. I think that from what I've seen at a couple of those locations, it looks like they're actually kind of building their company around the kind of open nature of peer-to-peer transactions. They are following the model of Bitcoin. If you go to a Cap One, it's a cafe where you can get coffee, and there's conference rooms and places where you can meet off and pair off with people. It's almost like it's designed with Bitcoin in mind. So, I would take this kind of stuff with caution, because I don't know if this is them responding to customers that were overzealous, or if they're, I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but this might not be a stupid move on their part.
If I had to guess, I would say it's just related to fraud. Because if you get a hold of somebody's credit card, there's no password on this thing, right? I think it's so ridiculous that we forget just how stupid the legacy system is. If I'm a waiter at a restaurant and you hand me your card and I take a photo of it with my cell phone, and I can go buy stuff, right? And one of the things that you could buy is Bitcoin. And I got to think that that's impacting them pretty heavily. So by saying no Bitcoin, they've done stuff like, I think for a while they were doing stuff like no Florida, right? Like if you're not a resident of the state of Florida and you go there for vacation, you better get cash on your way, because you have a pretty good chance of your card being disabled and being down for several days in the middle of your trip. And it's the same thing with Europe, but there was some news stories because people in Florida were pretty pissed off that they were being profiled. but yeah, these systems are so bad and so insecure that they do all kinds of random stuff all the time. I think I personally have probably had my card or my account frozen maybe 5 or 6 times in the last year, where I've actually had to go into a branch to get it unfrozen. And I'm not buying crack, right? Like my purchases are really, really boring. So that's the first thing I think of. But banks in general, they're just kind of dumb, and they're definitely afraid of new things. So I think that combination is probably enough to explain it. But maybe there's something more sinister.
Honestly, this was something where I thought, from the get, we'd see this with banks. So it's one of the things where, I guess you'd expect it at some point, but to hear what you're saying, and AK talking about, could be the price dip and people wanting chargebacks. It could be fraud from credit cards buying Bitcoin. It's definitely all possibilities. And, that's why we're in Bitcoin, is because that system is so bad. That's where it's whenever I come to oh, should I buy Bitcoin? The price, It's I always just think about, somebody could have my credit card number or my debit card number right now and go make a charge for some $1,000 thing at Home Depot, and I'm broke or whatever. And it just I always think man, I should just throw it in Bitcoin, because I know it's going to be there at that point. Just don't have to worry about somebody stealing it.
Yeah, me personally, I just think it's just fear. They're starting to realize there's interest in this, and this completely undermines their current business model. You can have custodial services exist with Bitcoin. There's nothing anybody can do to stop that. But you can't fundamentally run them on the same business model of printing money and interest on loans, because nobody's going to put their Bitcoin somewhere where it's oh, hey, yeah, by the way, the first term of our relationship is we're going to constantly devalue your spending power. Nobody will walk into that relationship when they have a choice not to. And so any kind of bank or custodial service thinking about pivoting into Bitcoin, they would have to hack and slash everything, their whole budget, their whole operation, completely redesign everything to a fundamentally different business model. And I think that thought scares the fucking piss out of them, because that's just everything's gone. They're just another competitor in a market with absolutely no disproportionately advantaged leg up. And I think they're really going to start scrambling to prevent that from being a scenario they have to confront.
Yeah, it's definitely in the cards too, them scrambling for an answer to try and figure out what to do because they realize their lunch is about to get eaten. But I don't know, like we're saying earlier, I'm sure a few smart people around there are making the right investment moves at home.
What's in your wallet? None of your business.
That's right.
But yeah, I just like, I can see people in these kinds of institutions like accepting reality and planning ahead. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like the guy quitting JP Morgan to go start some kind of custodial service in crypto with a fundamentally new business model isn't going to get JP Morgan to pull its head out of its ass. Like that Leviathan is just going to keep doing the same shit that it does, trying to protect the business model that they're engaged in now. And the guy leaving to do the smart thing isn't going to change that.
But Shinobi, are you saying that Amber is not going to be able to purify the banks? She's not going to be able to save them from themselves? Don't you know, purple hair on the most influential people in blockchain list?
Amber?
Number 6. How could we forget number 6?
I don't know who you guys are talking about. Like, who the hell are you talking about?
From the list that does not matter.
Huh? What? Who? Okay, but but like you guys get what I mean. It's like they have like no real option to sustain the business as is now, unless they can just make this stop happening. And eventually, it's the only rational move from their point to try to stop it from happening. Because if not, like their bottom line is fucked. Jibbity.
Looking at the chat, man, it looks like your bottom line's pretty screwed too because Huddle wants his hat, man.
Moving on. Look at this hilarious shit. Visa's asking for blockchain engineers with experience that is literally physically impossible to have.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the description doesn't say you have to have been an Ethereum developer for 8 years. It just says you have to have 8 years of experience in the industry. So they're basically looking for Satoshi Nakamoto, except Satoshi Nakamoto most likely doesn't have any experience with Ethereum, which means they're looking for Satoshi Nakamoto, but Satoshi Nakamoto actually wouldn't fulfill all of the qualifications, which is hilarious.
If you've ever tried to work with an HR rep to get a job description out in a big company, it is something to behold. So I feel bad for whoever it is that was trying to get that done, even though they were probably clueless too. But yeah,
it's just hilarious. It's like all we have to do is hire the guy. Like we can find the guy, right? And then everything will just be okay. Because we can just like hire him and give him money.
Yeah, and also how many Bitcoin developers, like obviously if you have 8 years of experience in the industry, that means you were working on Bitcoin like pretty much in the first few years. How many Bitcoin developers who have been around for that long also have experience in Ethereum and R3 and all this other stuff that they put in the list? Like even like you would be lucky to get a Bitcoin developer who has 8 years of experience in the industry. To say that they also have to have experience with Ethereum and R3, like you're looking for someone who doesn't exist.
And
or is going to be very expensive.
They were like one of the early cypherpunks that now wants a job with this.
I can think of like literally 2 people. Peter Todd, because obviously he has to look at everything and break it. And Eric Lombroso, just because he tends to be a lot more open-minded until he actually like sees why something's broken. but I can't think of anyone else who would have that experience, and neither of them have any interest in working for this kind of shit.
I mean, maybe Jameson Lapp. I don't know. I don't know how long he's been around.
Yeah, I think his Ethereum experience started when BitGo started supporting it. So I doubt that's as long as Visa requires.
If Ethereum Classic, counted, maybe, but I don't know. It's not really immutable. I don't know if the technology is the same. Like,
yeah, I mean, they're obviously trying to do something stupid, right? Like, I don't know what project this is for, but I guarantee you it's stupid, and we could all save them a lot of money just by explaining to them that they can't accomplish whatever it is that they think they're about to accomplish by hiring this guy. But it's another good sign, right? Like, Visa is trying to hire blockchain engineers. That's cool. I would not have expected that a year ago.
A not
Yeah, it's
blockchain
definitely
distributed ledger for smart contracts that delivers sound money.
Oh man,
they're slowly working their way towards Bitcoin. Give them another 5 to 15 years when they're bankrupt. They'll go, oh yeah, it's Bitcoin. That's the thing. How did I miss that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that just hire the guy is gonna work out for them.
Although, to be fair, I heard someone say on Twitter that apparently when they put out these job postings, they don't actually expect people to apply and fulfill all of the criteria. Apparently, you only have to fulfill like 60% of it. I think that would still be a bit difficult, but it came up in this discussion because apparently when women are applying for jobs, they think they have this notion that they have to fulfill every single criteria, and if they don't, they just don't apply. Whereas men are like, I fulfill like 6 out of 10 of that, I'll apply for that, and so then they get hired more often. So I don't know how much that's true, but I guess if you only have to fulfill 60% of the criteria, does that mean you only need 3 years of experience, or no, that would be like 6 years, 5 or 6 years of experience. Maybe that's what they really mean.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry to just cut in real quick. I just noticed Austin Lee in the chat talking about this.
Oh,
what
no.
the fuck is
What's going on?
Yeah, I saw that a few hours ago. I thought it was funny.
Why is Ed Pool contacting Polonius for a support ticket?
It's triple urgent.
They probably sent Bitcoin to a Bcash address or Bcash to a Bitcoin address, most likely.
Oh my god.
Please help us. Many thanks.
If there's anybody from Antpool watching, anybody at that place that has any sense of duty to Bitcoin, and that's what happened, leak it.
Urgent.
Yeah, triple urgent.
Yeah. It's hilarious, Austin.
I like how they sent the same message twice, because the first time they didn't actually include the handle of the exchange in the tweet, and so like, oh, they're probably not going to see this, and so instead of just deleting the tweet and making a new one, they do it in a thread.
Tag them twice; they'll pay attention.
It just makes me wonder, like, any of those guys really, like, they were wondering, like, oh, what's going to be the confusion? There's something going on even within the ranks.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, you got something to say, Joey?
Sorry, I thought I was muted. Sorry about that. I'm playing with my desk toy. I'm just screwing around, making noise. Sorry, guys.
It's all good.
You ready to take us into the fake news breakdown, Janine?
Yep. Yeah, so as you probably know, I don't like TechCrunch. I'm not going to give this particular author a hard time because I've given him a hard time already in the past, but I'll just refer to TechCrunch for now. So TechCrunch has this article about how Bitcoin's price has been manipulated. Now you might think, oh, they're probably talking about Bitcoin price now and manipulation that is going on now or within the last year. Nope. Instead, he cited a paper that was written last year, not even this year, last year, the beginning of last year, and it was studying price manipulation related to Mt. Gox leading up to the price increase to $1,000. And so the paper argued that the Willy bot that we are familiar with in Mt. Gox had a big effect on that. Now, the paper, as far as I can tell, it's okay. I mean, it's based on data directly from Mt. Gox, and it's looking at a very specific time period in which, looking at price action in a very specific time period. And as far as I can tell from reading through it quickly, it drew reasonable conclusions. The problem with this article, though, is if you scroll back up to the second paragraph, the author of this article says, "To many, it's been obvious that the Bitcoin markets are, at the very least, being manipulated by one or two big players." Well, that is not a past tense sentence referring to 2014. It's a present tense sentence, which means the author of this article thinks that the Bitcoin price is being manipulated now. Now, regardless of whether you think that might be the case, I think it would be a major jump in logic to say that price manipulation that happened within a period of months in 2014 proves that the price is still being manipulated 4 years later. That seems like a bit of a jump to me. What I find funny, if you look, because I think I also included the archive link to this article. If you scroll down to, I think, the second to last paragraph, or maybe the last paragraph in the article. So what was funny, the last paragraph, it says, "The bottom line is simple. If Bitcoin wants to be taken seriously, it probably should be this easy to or legal to manipulate the markets." That was actually a typo and he ended up fixing it. But I do think it was funny that he was saying it should be easy to manipulate the markets.
He accidentally said something true. If you want to take it seriously, you need to have guys like Jamie Dimon be able to push it around and fleece all of the rest of the people engaged.
Yeah. And so, this article is just so hilarious. A bunch of people, no one took it seriously. And Kyle Torpy even pointed out that, hey guys, the Bitcoin, this article, or the research paper that this article is based on was actually released last year. I did a report on it last year already. Not a big deal, not breaking news. And also the research paper itself was referring to Mt. Gox in late 2013, 2014, not current price. But of course, TechCrunch is perfectly willing, as they are fake news, engage in it and say that Mt. Gox is somehow still manipulating the price of Bitcoin 4 years later.
This is not a hit piece trying to scare people away, thinking some random internet asshole totally controls everything. Nothing to see here. Move along.
Yeah, and also if let's say he is, really trying to say that the price is being manipulated now, and it's obvious, as he said it's very obvious to many. It's okay, if it's so obvious, why don't you tell us who is doing the manipulating? Why don't you say who their names are or who the company's names are? But you didn't. You said Mt. Gox. Well, in case you haven't noticed, Mt. Gox is basically dead, or hopefully it will be dead unless Karpelis resurrects it with an ICO or something like that. But Mt. Gox is not around, guys. And the reason Mt. Gox was able to do that is because they were, I believe the figures 70% of the trading volume was happening on Mt. Gox, which is obviously a big deal. I mean, that was a huge chunk of the market, but of course the reason was there weren't a lot of exchanges around back then. Mt. Gox was the biggest one, and that's why their fall had such a great effect on the Bitcoin price, not only going up, but going back down. So, but to draw the conclusions that same thing is happening now, you cannot rely on a research paper about price action from 4 years ago. You have to look at current price action.
Yeah. I think it's kind of goes in line with that, just trying to explain the market. It's they're the price has fallen, grab some headlines that has been Bitcoin FUD in the past and just roll it. I don't know, because you're right. I mean, it's why are you writing about this now? And it just isn't, it's not, certainly not relevant to today. I mean, as far as 1 to 2 people controlling the market, I mean, like you're saying, if you want to get into that sort of discussion, it's a lot more in depth and you can start talking names and everything, but that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, the only instance in which it would be relevant is if there was evidence of a similar thing happening at one of the big exchanges, which, who knows, there very may well be, but you presented no evidence of that actually occurring. And so to draw a line between Mt. Gox and current prices, that doesn't add up at all. You have to provide further proof.
Yeah, it was definitely dishonest. I mean, it's a lie, right? Like that whole piece is just a constructed lie to use some evidence of something that happened in the past to basically make a statement that he wants to make now and then reach that conclusion. So it was clearly, you know, probably just too lazy to actually do any real research and write something people are interested in. But yeah, you know, definitely not anything other than intentional deception, right?
Well, the funniest part, because I recognize, I think I already said this in the private chat, but I recognized the stock photo. It looked very familiar to me, and it turns out that apparently TechCrunch, whenever they're talking about, you know, bad things going on in Bitcoin, they use the same stock image, which is like a smoky looking Bitcoin symbol. So I just find that hilarious that like, it's like, I basically have to like set up some kind of bot that alerts me whenever an article at TechCrunch is published with that image, because apparently those articles end up being really bad.
Totally.
Steaming pile of words coming your way.
Yeah, that's like it's the funniest thing too, because most of the publications that are covering things like this are fully aware that the art they choose is just like atrocious and cringy. I've actually had people poking around the Bitcoin Core Slack, like asking for help and like advice with that like a couple of months ago. All right, and I guess the next thing is a warning. Warning. Anybody who uses BitcoinTalk, who is regularly Googling for things, because you know their in-house search is rate limited and they generally point people to use Google. Watch out for BitcoinTalk.to. It's a site that looks like it's set up to pretty much just completely mirror the actual Bitcoin talk. And very probably, I will say 90% or more, just solely set up to snag people's login information. So if you're arriving at a Bitcoin talk page through Google, make sure it is not like an incorrect URL. BitcoinTalk.org.
Well, I also wanted to point out that early in the show you had, I've seen it on 2 shows now, there was an ad in the sidebar about, I think it was from Cisco, and it was saying, are you prepared for ransomware? And it was an ad, so obviously you click on it. And it's like, if I wanted to teach people to be ready for ransomware and not click on random things, how would I do that? Would I make an ad?
Getting the ad blocker, okay? After the show, I'm getting the ad blocker, okay? Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, Cisco, if you want to teach people, you know, not to be victims of ransomware, the first thing you want to do is not teach them to click on ads about ransomware, because that is how it gets delivered.
Yeah, and I think just following up on that, you know, like I think, yeah, it's good to know exactly what URL you're going to, you know, make sure the HTTPS is there, and you know, just make sure that the URL you're going to is what you're going for, because yeah, if you're in this space, and there's definitely people searching for your login information to try and cross-check exchanges and all sorts of stuff to try and see if they could get a hold of your Bitcoin. So yeah, I think this, be careful with your URLs.
Well, On another note, watch out also for promoted ads, because I've been noticing there's a lot of capture in people imitating other companies. Oftentimes this is done for marketing purposes too. So they have a different 800 number or 877 or 888 number that's not the typical call-in line. Personally, I don't feel safe calling those numbers, and I think that that's a potential attack vector, right? So be sure to make sure that it's not the ad, it's the actual website that contains the number which you're calling.
Yeah.
Cool.
Apparently, though, banks actually have this habit of telling you to call a number that is not the publicly available one. And when you ask them, why are you asking me to call a number that I can't find on your website or anywhere online? They're like, we don't always use it, or some. Yeah, there are banks who actually make it part of their practice to tell you to call a number that is not public. So it's also on them. Like, it's not just people being stupid. It's banks that are, being very lazy and training people to do this kind of thing. And that's really disgusting.
And the first thing that my bank asks for when I call is, what's your full social security number? Not the last 4, not the last 6, not, can I leave off like just the first one so that you at least have to guess 10 if you want to steal my identity? No, I want the full social security number. Say it right now on your unencrypted cell phone conversation before I'll let you even talk to a representative that makes $12 an hour and could write down my social security number. It's a disaster. I think in times like this, like, when people are freaking out about price, again, that's absurd, but it's always good to remember, like, the existing system is not without risk too, right? If you have your private keys and you have them in cold storage, it's so much safer, even with price volatility, even in a stable country like the US or Europe. Even under those circumstances, you could definitely argue that the price volatility is not so great that it makes up, or that it counteracts the safety that you have of actually being able to secure your money.
Yeah, banks deciding to use social security cards and numbers as identification documents was like the most colossal identity mistake in probably the history of banking, because literally the social security cards used to say on them, this is not supposed to be an identity card, and yet they did it anyway. and that's why Equifax is able to screw us all.
Well, just to make it extra flimsy, you're not allowed to laminate that little piece of paper either. It says do not laminate for some stupid reason. Yeah, you're not allowed to laminate them.
I didn't even know. Oh, so they want them to be destroyed, and everyone go through the whole process of like trying to get a new one, and it's like, oh, this is actually difficult. Wow, that's even stupider.
It was probably really high-tech paper, when they first did it, and they're like, no, when you hand this over, you'll be able to feel the quality of the paper is, uncounterfeitable.
It's so funny that we're stuck in that, and it is ridiculous. I can't tell you how many times I call the bank and some random person asks me for my full social, and I'm just like, that is so stupid. Like, why do they do that? But yeah, it's this system we're stuck in right now. So,
and the reason that it used to have it printed on it, I don't know if it still does, that this is not used for ID, is that when the U.S. government decided that they wanted to put an asset tag on all of their citizen slaves, there was a revolt, right? People were disgusted and pissed off because they knew what that meant, right? Like, if you put an asset tag on me, you might want to actually use me, right? You've turned me into a product on the shelf. So it didn't go over without a big political battle, and that was one of the things that they did to try to appease the population that no, this is not an asset tag. It's not an identity. It's just a number for you to get benefits.
Yeah, I mean, you're only going to get benefits if you're like, I mean, I would say over 50, maybe over 40 if you're very lucky, but anyone who's younger than 40, you're never going to see those benefits. Like Social Security, there's no way Social Security can last as long enough for anyone in like 30s or younger to actually claim any of it. You're basically paying into a system that your grandparents and possibly your parents are going to benefit from. But after that, it's not going to. I mean, like, even if the system worked as outlined, you have this problem where there are now Well, actually, no. Now there are more millennials than boomers. Apparently, I heard someone told me that, but I don't think there are actually enough young people to, keep that system going, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that system's pretty wrecked, I think.
It's screwed. But and part of the reason is that they don't actually put the money aside; they just spend it as they get it. And the other problem is that, like, you could say your grandparents are going to benefit, but they're looking at like negative returns on their savings, right? Like, that's not exactly a winning investment, even for those folks that are going to, cash in, because they're getting dollars that are so much less valuable than the dollars they paid in because we've printed the hell out of them.
Yeah, when I say benefit, I mean you're actually going to have the opportunity to cash out something, even if it's even if it's shit. But
I'm just gonna bring up, like, as much as, like, you're right, like, it's very ridiculously hard to get these benefits. Like, I benefited from the social net of that. Like, yeah, like, I don't know. Like, that's where it's kind of like
well, there's always exceptions. I mean, if we put you in a foreign country and just about break you mentally, and you're right on the edge of blowing up some shit, then then we'll kick you some benefits. So
that's right where I was gonna say, like, it was not easy, man. Like, I not only had to do that, I had to prove it several times, like with official paperwork, and make sure I walked in there with, like, gashes on my foreheads from seizures and bit tongues and all kinds of crap. Where it's like, and even then it was like, we don't really believe you. It wasn't until I had a head-on collision before, like, a police report that said, you can't deny these things anymore, before they actually, caved. So, like, I agree with y'all, but, like, yeah, there is, like, these few instances where it can help.
Man. I mean, they need to take care of people in need on occasion. Just like the mafia used to hand out turkeys in New York. I think they're probably not powerful enough to be that visible anymore. But there's always been an element of the gangsters having to, keep local support, because it's more cost effective than just shooting people all the time. But don't let that confuse you with actual care.
Yeah, like, I will just, like, finish off that thought is, like, I know they wouldn't have agreed if I wasn't in uniform. It had a lot to do with the fact that I was in uniform when I got that I got injured, that, like, this all sort of was like, okay, yeah, like, it's like our fault and our bad and all this stuff. Like, because I'd seen too many people going through life in general and run into problems like I ran into, but they weren't in uniform and they have no access to this stuff. So, yeah, there's problems within it.
I mean,
I see a lot of the healthcare industry just sucking that money up under the guise of mental health too, and they're not providing treatment solutions. They say they are, but they're just sucking it up, and I don't see any value add there.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a gray area, and I mean, like, there's a difference from, like, at least in my opinion, somebody who actually incurs a real cost because of, like, something they're doing in service to society, and somebody who just goes, like, give me shit because I don't want to take any effort or actually try to do anything. But I mean, it also kind of gets into, like, people need help, but that's different, like, societal mechanisms can fill that role. I mean, before we had, like, the welfare state and the kind of, like, 20th century, like, nation state that we all grew up under, like, where do you think, like, do you think nobody got help when they were in a shit situation? Like, you had private entities taking care of that. You had things like, churches, like, focal points of community. Like, when somebody was down and out, the community would help them if they actually, like, deserved it. If they weren't just sitting around fucking off and expecting everything to be handed to them, the community will help you because you're trying to help yourself. And I mean, there are a lot more ways for that need in society to be met than just a government taking money from everybody and then re-divvying it up.
Definitely. So, like, that's where it's like, I don't know, I kind of have, like, conflicting opinions on a lot of this stuff, just because I have sort of seen, like, a little bit of benefit in some just, like, some governance and in the society, but like, definitely seen, like, a lot of pitfalls in the decision making process, and where I don't know, I'm starting to come around to this idea of like, you definitely like, you know, there's definitely other ways to do this. Like I'm not new to that, but like this idea of like, just like smaller local communities just seem to be better when it comes to that sort of thing. And like having just like a community fund to take care of your community. Like, I don't know, that just whenever you start to make it a country the size of the United States and a honeypot the size of Texas, it's I don't know, to steer that thing. You know, I think that's what's led us to a lot of trouble today when it comes to, you know, you just have a large honeypot of money and people's ability to control that, and leads you down some dark paths where, you know, if we had it just like smaller and localized, it wouldn't lead to so many problems.
Yeah, what we're talking about is just the study of economics, right? If you want a certain outcome, if you want fewer people to be sick, or you want fewer people to be you know, impoverished, what are the things, how would you organize things, right, to accomplish that goal? That's basically what economics can tell you, right? If you want to get 62 peanuts, mathematics can tell you how to get 62 peanuts. It doesn't tell you whether it's a good idea to have 62 peanuts or not. And economics can't tell you whether it's a good idea to minimize human suffering or not. But what it can tell you is that if you want to minimize human suffering, here's the things that would be counterproductive to that. Such as, you know, using violence to acquire people's stuff in the hands of a small group of folks and then have it distributed. That's just not a good model. That doesn't get you where you're trying to go. And there are definitely better models, and a lot of it's been explored, but I think Bitcoin's going to make it cost effective to actually do them.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I missed my chance for a smooth segue long ago. But let's dive into other reasons why you should be very skeptical of websites. So, Blackwallet is a Stellar Lumen wallet. And I will give them this. It's not a full custodial wallet. It's simply a user-managed client side. But when you're interacting with that through a website, regardless of where your keys are, there's still attack surfaces that aren't there for something just entirely localized on your machine, such as a DNS hijack. Some person pretty much getting that domain to redirect to their server. And what these guys did is they set up software to, if you had 20 lumens or more in your balance, it would redirect you to an alternative site with an address that would take your money. And they wound up getting 400 grand worth of Stellar lumens.
Well, I do love the fact that there is another version of that Cisco ad that I mentioned several minutes ago, except this one is about buying a book, ransomware for dummies. It was at the middle of the article, I think. Right there. There you go.
My brain, it just
buy ransomware for dummies. Click on that ad and hope that you don't actually get ransomware installed. No, don't click it, Shinobi.
Click it. Click
No.
it.
Don't click it. Don't click it.
You said
where does
click
it actually go? It goes to Google Ad Services. That's not safe.
But you said click it.
No. I said don't click it.
Click it and just hit OK like 7 times, all right?
Make sure JavaScript is running. I mean, Java's running.
Cookies enabled.
But yeah, it's, you know, like
that sucks. I mean, it sucks that people got stuck on that website for sure. It's tuition though. You gotta pay to, and hopefully, you know, people are losing a couple $1,000 here and there, and they can get it back before their whole life savings is at stake.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it just goes to show, you know, just web clients are not a good way to handle your keys. I mean, I will say that one exception would be applets for hardware wallets, because you have the entire key management process on a specific piece of hardware. But like, if you're coming into this space and you're using some of these web wallet services to manage other alts because there aren't really any other options, or whatever the situation is, it doesn't matter if the keys stay in your browser, because you're still interacting with this whole thing through a website that gets served from a web server that introduces that place to just cut that and move that somewhere else. And then you have no idea what you're being presented with. You just know what you're seeing on the screen. And things like this can happen.
Yeah, you're always at a risk for that failure. from whatever your service sits on top of. So that's why it's always smart, like you're saying, to have a hardware wallet, something where it's in your hands, in front of you.
Mm-hmm. And I guess Janine, you wanna take us through this last bit of drama? I'm not gonna lie, I did not make it past the picture because it just pissed me off so much.
Oh, I mean, there really isn't that much to read. I mean, she basically tried to find the most ridiculous and rich, apparently, people in Bitcoin and then interview them and try to pass that off as, I have interviewed the Bitcoin community and this represents who they are. Well, well, to just start off with a few criticisms of the article itself, as you can see that paragraph right there where it says the goal may be decentralization, but money is extremely concentrated. Coinbase has more than 13 million accounts that own cryptocurrencies. I guess that's probably the most accurate data point she has in this entire article, because I mean, if you got that wrong, like, you're really screwed in terms of your research abilities. But then she says data, quote, suggests that about 94% of the Bitcoin wealth is held by men. How did you come to that conclusion? Did you use Google Analytics? Because that sounds like the exact same percentage that I was seeing in Google Analytics, because Google assumes that if you go to a Bitcoin website, that makes you a man. And so they probably thought, if 94% of the people going to Bitcoin websites are men, just because we make that assumption, oh my God, the crypto genius ad. Oh my God, Shinobi, you have to get an ad blocker.
Why?
That guy is.
Right. Yeah, we do need an ad blocker.
Anyway,
that's a great story though too. I mean, look at that guy. Just
well, the thing is, I think it was last year he said Bitcoin was a scam. So what changed his mind? What made him a genius in the last year?
Little 3-second clip on mainstream media talking about money and Bitcoin.
Yeah, but anyway, if you want to see a rebuttal of the whole Bitcoin wealth is concentrated in a few addresses, go and see Andreas's latest video, because that rebuts it. Because the basic summary of it is that addresses are not people. You can literally have exchanges who are holding the money of like hundreds of thousands of customers in only a few addresses, which, that's a security concern, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, you wouldn't say that wealth, you wouldn't like look at a bank and say wealth is concentrated in a bank. And then, I mean, obviously the bank accounts represent, there are people that have accounts in the bank, and they each control that money to some very limited extent. You wouldn't say wealth is concentrated in the bank necessarily. But you can also have situations where you can have a Bitcoiner who's used thousands of addresses, hundreds. So they might have small, yeah. As you can tell, this is like her choice of who she thinks is most relevant to interview. But I guess we should probably get into the crux of why this became a big deal on Twitter last night. Because believe it or not, even though she claims that, women are underrepresented in Bitcoin, apparently women actually disagree with her on that point, or at least maybe they don't disagree with her on that point, but they thought it was irresponsible of her to then extrapolate that imbalance into her own article, because she actually interviewed at least 2 women, for at least Elizabeth Stark, for 45 minutes. I don't know about the other woman. But she did interview women. She just didn't put them in the article, because I guess they were running counter to her narrative that Bitcoin is just a bunch of dudes who care about Lambos and riches and all that. So she got into a bit of an argument with Elizabeth Stark, and then I ended up going in. I don't know where So I just basically asked her a bunch of questions about like because she was making the assumption that the gender imbalance was a problem. And then she said, everyone acknowledges this. Well, if everyone acknowledges it, assuming that's true, then what exactly does it solve by putting that in your article? Like, are you making more people more aware of that fact, or what was the goal of that? She never actually answered that question. She just ended up saying she wanted me to email her to if I actually want to help out, because I wasn't already helping out. I was I was apparently just annoying her. And so, and I also apparently was treating her as a straw man. So my response was, well, it seems like I have a pretty high chance of becoming a straw woman if I contact you. As I used it in this, I don't know if anyone gets that, but a straw man argument is like a straw man, and a straw man argument is something that, like, an argument that doesn't exist. And so I'm a straw woman because I don't actually exist, like all the other women that she interviewed or did not interview. So
you
yeah.
belong in like a horse's kitchen or something, man.
I don't know if I don't think she was making that kind of argument, but she definitely did not see the connection between the fact that she is not willing to feature women prominently in her stories, because that runs counter to her narrative about, or her idea of Bitcoin as being this like bro culture. And yeah, it was just funny to see her then being criticized by a bunch of women saying that her portrayal was inaccurate. It was great.
Yeah, I don't even give her that much credit. I mean, that was such a tabloid sort of write-up, right? It's like it was just trying to like appeal to like people's basest desire of jealousy, right? Like, oh, look at all these freaking annoying people that are making tons of money and you're not, and let's get that emotion going, and then maybe you can celebrate when all this crypto fakeness falls apart, right? That seemed like it was the overall thing, and then she needed some support for that. So, well, yeah, these a-holes, they're also just men, and they don't want women there. And what else can let's get a picture of some really annoying characters that all these guys are crypto millionaires, but for some reason they all have to live in the same house. Let's do the whole story based on them. It's pretty absurd.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that there was the online edition, which was what was being discussed, which most people saw. There was also a print edition with a different title, which was Meet Your Masters. And everyone,
my gosh,
it's even worse. Like, it's bad enough. It's bad enough to appeal to people's jealousy by saying these are the people getting rich while you're not. It's another thing to say, like, these are the people that are going to rule over you.
Right. Yeah. The people in crypto, the people that are trying to democratize things, give people financial, freedom, create basically the abolition of modern day human slavery. These are the guys you have to be worried about. These are the slave owners.
Yeah, I've asked a few people this, but I can't actually recall a single New York Times journalist that I actually like their writing. There have been a few cases in the past where I've liked individual articles, which it may be possible that I also like the author, but I don't remember them. I really cannot think of a single New York Times journalist that I like. Because when I think of what are the journalists that I dislike the most of them work for the New York Times, or at least have written there.
Yeah, it's upsetting to see.
Or all of them.
I mean, like, that's what's upsetting is like, because this is the New York Times. It's like one of these widely spread publications too, and it's just like, this is the read up that they get whenever it comes to this sort of thing. And I don't know, like, I remember the New York Times published a small little article about falling down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and going to a local Bitcoin meetup. And they discussed the possibilities of new technologies, talking to Elizabeth Stark about Lightning. And that was like a pretty good like article just to like, what it feels like in the moment. But yeah, it feels like this article, she talked to Elizabeth Stark and didn't even really bring up the conversation. And, and then just went into this whole launch about, it being about men who are becoming millionaires off of just bullshit ideas that they turn into ICOs that, become all these millions of dollars and they're worth more than Jeff Bezos now. And I mean, like, it's unfortunate because it's just like, I guess it's just like an article that's trying to describe the environment. And, like, they're not seeing what we're seeing, like, like what you're saying, JW, about somebody trying to create like some actual accountability and trying to take care of people's like value and everything. They just see that what is this like bright, lights and fireworks of the ICO craze. And she just went off on it. And yeah, it sucks to see because, this is being read by a lot of people sitting down at their coffee table.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I'm
clearly
not sure how much the New York Times is selling magazines anymore or newspapers, so maybe they don't matter too much.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know about you guys, but to me, it seems like there was this FOMO to crypto narrative, and then now it's the crypto is a scam narrative. Get pissed at this rich ass. It's like, wait a minute. You were telling everybody and their mom a month ago to throw all their money in, and then demonizing it. It's almost like, you try to drag all these people in financially and then fuck with shit and get them pissed off. Try to get them alienated from the entire concept. Get them looking at it negatively in the most visceral way possible. You just lost money. I mean, that's how I see it. And it's kind of very
well, it's a business model, right? They have to just constantly get people to engage in drama, and they're getting less and less. They're faking it less and less, right? They're just being more and more willing to be overtly ridiculous about stuff, right? It's like, we got to bomb Russia. No, we got to bomb Korea. No, we got to do this. We got to do that. There's always some crazy thing. It's never the right thing, because that's not going to work, right? Like, oh my gosh, we got to stop, supporting a war in Yemen where the Saudis are killing, a large number of people. That's not going to work, because that's not going to get us all fired up. But yeah, if you can get us really excited about investing in something and then tell us it's a scam, like, we're going to keep buying papers, right? We're going to keep engaging with your content. So I think that's another problem that Bitcoin's going to solve, is people are going to not be the product anymore, right? It's not going to be the advertisers or the actual payers of the New York Times. It'll be us.
I mean, that's definitely an aspect of it. But I mean, personally, I don't think the news is purely profit motivated. I mean, if you really dig into like the actual history of media in this country, like going back to the 60s and the 70s, you've had all kinds of deep in the background ties with different intelligence agencies or like federal law enforcement agencies. And there very much are instances where there are narratives pushed widely for political ends and not simply like profit motivated by the institution. And I mean, I think it's really kind of naive to discount the possibility that that would be the case with something like Bitcoin. And I just think the way it was just like FOMO, and then flip, it's a scam, everything's crashing. Like, it just seems way too synchronized and coordinated, because it really was like.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I really think that like more people should get the word out there, because one of the things that happened in that thread with Nelly was that people were sharing statistics that were running counter to the ones that she had in her article, which she obviously didn't check very thoroughly, because it would have become obvious. Like, if you just understand at a basic level how Bitcoin works, you would pretty easily figure out that addresses are not people. And so if one person can have multiple addresses, or a company which holds the funds of many, many, many people, that obviously skews the data. And one person said that one exchange actually, that I don't remember which one it was, but an exchange apparently said that they found that 30 to 40% of their customers were women, which I actually thought was, yeah, Bruce. I don't know which. Yeah, I have seen someone actually cite like an article that said which exchange it was. I don't remember where that was though. But yeah, that was the same figure I saw. Which I actually thought was I was actually surprised it was that high. But then again, that makes sense for something that, if you want Bitcoin to be widely adopted, it would make sense that one of the signals of adoption is that you have a more equal gender parity in terms of the adoption. Because obviously, everyone uses money, and women especially, within the household, it's actually usually women, especially with couples, it's usually the woman that are in a married couple. That's usually the woman that handles a lot of the household finances. So it would make sense for women to have a very large role in Bitcoin once it gets adopted, because, they'll have to be active in that. So the idea that, this is a thing that only men are interested in, it's completely based on false and misinterpreted data. Because if you're going based on Google Analytics, yeah, you're basically, like I told her, if you keep promoting this narrative that Bitcoin is only for men, then you're going to create a vicious cycle where women are going to see those articles and they're going to think, oh, this isn't for me because apparently only men are interested in it. It might just be a scam among a small group of people. But if you see like a general interest from like the general population, as you saw with Joseph Young, he just overheard this conversation between some normal women in a cafe, I suppose. And so if you have that happening, that completely ruins the narrative. Like,
yeah, it's all about pushing that. Just, I mean, like from my experience at these meetups, like when it comes to people in there, it's like half and half. And to be honest, it's like, a lot of the women that get it and they're like writing things down and they're like, super focused. And, like Bruce is saying, like there's statistics that point otherwise. Obviously, they're just trying to push that narrative because, she talked to Elizabeth Stark. So I don't know. It's why are you going to ignore all these things that are in front of you pointing the other direction unless you're trying to just push a narrative?
And there's another layer of stupid there too, because like, could you imagine getting upset if too many men were trying to do something that was going to end war? Like, what? Like, why do we even care? Like, hopefully it will be all of us, right? But I'm certainly not gonna say that if there's too many Chinese people that are anti-war, then oh man, yeah, something's amiss here, right? Or if there's too many men or women or whatever category, like that's a good thing to be anti-war and to be trying to invest in something that's going to create a more peaceful world. And gosh, we're assholes a lot. So would it be the end of the world if men actually got something right for once?
Yeah, see, Rick, even though your meetup is gender balanced, apparently the ones that she went to were not. They were mostly men. So your experience apparently doesn't matter to her.
My anecdote.
I guess not.
Your anecdote.
Yeah. That's where it's like, yeah, she's just, I don't know, because I don't know. This thing's becoming so big that I'm seeing interest to where it's hard to imagine that even over there, and especially in Silicon Valley. I mean, like Sacco in the Mumble is just like all over Bitcoin and crypto. And I mean, like, and she runs a bar there in Silicon Valley. It's hard to imagine that she was really looking at things on the ground, that she had probably already had this already rolled up in her head.
Mm-hmm. It's like, and then the funny thing is from my experience, at least, it seems to be more so that the channels that are kind of pushing like trading advice and like shitcoin pumps and stuff like that. But even just among like the people doing content in the space, like you can see women popping up everywhere. And just the idea that this is still just the nerdy white males club, it's like, no, like get the fuck out of here. Like that phase ended a long time ago. And the only reason to keep perpetuating it is to just paint that negative image to try and steer people away from the space.
And also, even if you were at a meetup that was mostly men, like, I mean, do I want to force women to attend a meetup that they're not interested in? Like, what exactly is the solution to the no women meetup? Like, I mean, if the problem is that they're too scared to come because there's not enough women, well, then you get a group of women together and you go, and that's what you do. like I don't know what's the solution to not having enough. Well, one solution, there's actually a women's only Bitcoin meetup in Berlin that I haven't been to, but I've seen it a lot of times. But I'm not interested in forcing women who are not interested in Bitcoin yet to go to a meetup. Like, I mean, if they want to come, then I'll go with them. But I don't see how that would help the situation. Like they should be coming because they're intrinsically interested.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I mean, like
conflating Bitcoin and all of the ICO nonsense, and then focusing on all the ICO nonsense and saying that that's Bitcoin. So you know, maybe the ratios are different. Not that I care anyway, but maybe the ratios are different of how many women are involved in ICOs because they actually have a conscience versus, you know, how many women are involved in Bitcoin.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, yeah, you might see that change because, like, I think these women, they like want to take care of their household. You know, it's like I see women like writing down information because they know it's important to take care of their household. It's like the most important thing to them. And, you know, I mean, like, that's where you don't see them flopping, you know, running around through these ICOs. And maybe that's where it's like, I think that percentage might be real, where it's like, maybe that is sort of dominant by men. But, you know, it'd be hard to find any information to back that up, really. I don't know. It's like, I don't really have that interest because, like, you know, Janine's saying, it's like, if you're not interested, then don't be interested. It's sort of just like a come as you are thing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, like Janine said earlier, like this, like it kind of started out mostly men and is just kind of becoming less and less so. And I mean, that's just natural in any new thing. I mean, just like scientifically speaking, men are more reckless, more prone to take risks, and generally the ones like out ahead of the pack when it comes to trying new experimental shit. And I mean, all this like this increase in like women getting involved in the space means is like people are viewing this as less and less of a risk and less experimental. And the more we see that kind of get in line to a natural ratio, like the more that's showing just overall confidence in this, because the men got here first because it's like, whoo, risky thing, huge risk, huge reward, I'm in. And the more it looks less like that and looks like a sound, like inevitably rational step to take, like all that's showing is the space is maturing, the technology is maturing.
But definitely, if you are concerned about the fact that there aren't enough women, if you do have the chance to interview someone like Elizabeth Stark, do not leave them out of your article. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Well said.
Absolutely. It's dirty.
All right. So who's got some ending pearls of wisdom?
Buy the dip. Buy the dip.
Buy stuff that's useful and hold it until everybody else realizes it.
Don't hold your money in centralized exchanges. That's my last warning.
All right,
Last warning.
You have to participate in this.
Be careful with the ads. Don't you know? Make sure that you're actually clicking on the company in Google. Don't click the ad the first thing. Don't just call the number on your cell phone because it's a hot link. Bad.
All right. And my final word is, if you want to find the moon, I show you the way to the moon. Like and subscribe, and we go to the moon. I show you the way. Okay.